It hit the entertainment world like a cold, devastating strike. Leaked files, stamped with the aura of classified material, quietly circulating like newly unsealed FBI documents emerging from the shadows. This time, according to revelations from Jermaine Jackson, those files do more than reignite the greatest obsession surrounding Michael Jackson, exactly how many surgeries he underwent. They also expose how those lifeless numbers became inseparably tied to the tragedy of his life. That figure, long concealed, distorted, and swallowed by decades of rumor, now returns with the sharpness of an investigative report, tearing through the final layer of protection around a man already exhausted from having every millimeter of his face scrutinized. There is something chilling and bare about it, as if all the silent pain within him is being dragged into a harsh spotlight, without warning, without mercy, true to the nature of a top-secret file finally brought to light. Before we unlock this secret, remember to like and subscribe to continue this journey into truths that will make your heart tighten. Perhaps nothing illustrates a sharper paradox than what emerges from these accounts. A young man under blinding lights, a brilliant smile fixed on the familiar face of a rising music phenomenon, while beneath that radiance lay a fault line waiting to give way. In 1979, Michael was widely perceived as untouchable, self-assured, commanding, seemingly destined to break every barrier placed before him on stage. Yet testimonies later collected suggest that even then, a quiet vulnerability lingered in his gaze, as though he were guarding something the world was not prepared to confront. Then came the incident, sudden, unplanned, and occurring precisely as his ascent toward superstardom reached a critical height. According to records and eyewitness recollections, that rehearsal was meant to be routine. Instead, a slip, dismissed at first as trivial, became the first documented fracture. Michael's nose was seriously injured, sending him into surgery for the first time in his life. Observers recall an eerie calm. No protest, no visible fear. Only his hand tightening around his sleeve, as if anchoring himself while something essential was being taken away. That single accident, preserved in clinical notes and later whispered conversations, opened a corridor no one foresaw, a path toward years of scrutiny and physical change under an unrelenting public gaze. What remained largely unknown at the time, according to an assistant present during those early days, was that the initial surgery left him feeling unfinished. Not because he sought perfection, as later myths would claim, but because the outcome compromised his breathing and, by extension, his voice, the core of his identity. Medical discomfort persisted, affecting his ability to sing. A second physician was consulted, and a corrective procedure followed. This was not a step toward vanity, but toward functionality, the simple need to breathe freely, to perform without fear. Yet that second step, noted plainly in medical documentation, would later be woven into countless narratives far removed from its original intent. In retrospect, the central conflict is unmistakable. Michael sought normalcy, the world demanded exceptionality. He wished to be regarded as a devoted young artist, while the public and press began treating his face as a puzzle to be decoded. Once the corrective surgery was completed, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers multiplied, according to those present, faster than the rhythms he created. The bitter irony is clear in the record. A common workplace accident was transformed into spectacle solely because of who he was. One detail surfaces repeatedly in accounts rarely shared outside inner circles. At this stage, Michael still bore the softness of his early 20s, yet his relationship with the mirror had changed. Not obsession, but vigilance. After the first surgery, he reportedly studied his reflection longer, not to judge appearance, but to ensure stability. The fear of struggling to breathe before thousands of fans took root, a rational anxiety later misread and sensationalized. A studio colleague later recalled that during recording sessions, Michael would occasionally touch the bridge of his nose, not as display, but as reflex, checking whether it could endure the strain of demanding vocals. These gestures, later dissected endlessly by observers, were in fact the habits of someone recovering from a difficult procedure. Viewed in context, a young black artist in an industry relentlessly policing appearance, the insecurity became heavier, more personal. Notably, from his first encounter with surgery, Michael did not pursue radical alteration. On the contrary, evidence suggests he was trying to preserve what he recognized as himself. But the era was unforgiving. Unspoken judgments, racialized beauty standards, and constant comparisons accumulated quietly. The 1979 accident thus became more than a broken nose. It struck directly at an already fragile sense of self. Late at night, while composing, he reportedly wrestled not with physical pain, but with the realization that he was no longer seen solely as an artist, but as a subject to be analyzed. That tension between self-preservation and public dissection formed cracks far deeper than any surgical incision. And so the file opens this way. One fall led to one surgery. One surgery necessitated another. And those two medical events became the focal point of global fixation. The first true rupture was not in his face, but in how the world began to look at him, with curiosity, suspicion, and judgment entwined. No one can say with certainty what shifted in Michael's eyes after those first two surgeries, but the change was unmistakable. Somewhere between medical necessity and unspoken external pressure, a hairline fracture appeared, documented not in headlines, but in behavior. When he returned to the stage, the applause sounded the same, yet insiders observed a new caution in how he stepped into the light. It was not fear of the audience, but an awareness of the gaze, eyes trained to detect alteration in his face, even when he himself sensed none. Following the second nasal procedure, murmurs accelerated. Members of his own team recall questions that seemed casual but landed with surgical precision. Why do you look different? Did you change something? Does your nose affect your singing? Individually, they were minor. Collectively, they formed pressure. For an artist already marked by physical trauma and emotional sensitivity, those remarks accumulated. According to accounts later given, this was when he began spending more time before the mirror, not out of vanity, but uncertainty, trying to locate the boundary between what was required and what he was being carried into. Backstage, rumors began circulating that Michael continued altering his nose. Verified records confirmed several nasal procedures after 1979, a factual sequence that became raw material for speculation. Certain media voices framed these facts through language tinged with long-standing racial bias. Officially neutral, the tone nevertheless suggested an implicit rule: that someone who looked like him was not permitted too much change, not allowed to move beyond the image the public felt entitled to. Those closest to him described a pattern. Each time an article dissected his face, Michael withdrew into the studio, working until the hum of the air conditioning faded. He was not volatile or confrontational. He became quiet. That silence, colleagues said, was unsettling. It was the stillness of someone realizing his own body had become public property. In entertainment, scrutiny is expected. With Michael, it was forensic, as though every detail were under examination. Then another change surfaced, unrelated to surgery. His skin began to lighten unevenly. Medical records would later confirm vitiligo, but at the onset, confusion reigned. One associate recalled a moment before a photo shoot when Michael noticed a lighter patch along his neck and froze, silent for several seconds, as if registering a loss of control. Music had never frightened him. This did. He was an artist forged under intense light, reliant on precision and mastery. The unpredictability of his skin undermined a key defense against exposure. That condition soon became the foundation for rumor. Instead of medical explanation, theories flourished: intentional bleaching, rejection of heritage, reinvention of identity. None were substantiated, yet they spread relentlessly. The paradox was stark. Attention fixated on his skin while forgetting he remained the defining musical figure of his era. The stage was his domain, but it was also unforgiving. Lights amplified every shift in tone, contour, texture. Makeup used to conceal vitiligo was reframed as proof of deception. A medical adjustment to breathe became addiction. Evidence was unnecessary. His name alone guaranteed amplification. Over time, the pressure to manage perception intensified, not to escape himself, but to preserve the fragile confidence required to face millions. A crew member recalled one performance where the spotlight exposed vitiligo patches clearly. Michael sang without pause. Backstage, he said nothing for a long while, absorbing the realization that his body no longer complied with the image people expected. These elements, minor medical interventions, heavier makeup, attempts at concealment, formed the backdrop of the second phase of his transformation. The record shows a man caught between necessity and spectacle, struggling to retain identity as his body changed beyond his command. No one said it outright, but those closest to Michael sensed the moment when everything began to shift. It was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual pull, quiet, persistent, like a figure drifting into a current before realizing the shoreline was gone. By the early 1990s, Michael's face had become public property. Every contour, every angle, every fleeting expression was enlarged, isolated, and examined, as if ownership of his own image had subtly been taken from him. According to compiled records, Michael underwent approximately 10 major surgical procedures during this period. In another career, that number might have passed without notice. But because he was Michael Jackson, each procedure was treated as a clue in a larger puzzle. The gap between fact and fiction widened quickly. Some accounts alleged clinic visits every 2 months for years. Others inflated the total to more than a dozen. From these fragments, the media, often without verification, assembled a far more dramatic conclusion: dozens, even hundreds of surgeries. None of it was substantiated. Yet repetition has a way of hardening speculation into belief, especially when the ordinary is less appealing than the sensational. What intensified the weight of it all was Michael's response. Witnesses recall that whenever the phrase "so many surgeries" surfaced, his expression would momentarily stiffen, like a hand brushing an old wound. He neither denied nor affirmed it. He went quiet. That silence functioned as both shield and barrier, masking a deeper uncertainty. Had he truly changed that much, or was the narrative changing him? Behind the scenes, those working with him noticed subtle adjustments. He requested softer lighting, gentler camera angles, not to conceal, but to avoid having his face mercilessly projected and dissected. A lighting technician remembered him entering a rehearsal, pausing under the glare and quietly saying, "This is too revealing." It sounded less like a demand than an admission of fatigue. During rehearsals, he was sometimes seen touching the bridge of his nose, a habitual check rather than a cosmetic concern. The fear of breathlessness from earlier years lingered. For a performer dependent on breath, that anxiety was profound. Yet the press recast the gesture as obsession. Often, drama is not found in events themselves, but in how they are framed. At the center was a relentless tension. The need to control his image to survive the judgment, and the pull of a vortex where any change became proof of addiction. The truth existed between those extremes. Physicians later confirmed that Michael did not pursue constant radical alteration. The documented procedures represented only a fraction of the stories circulated. But accuracy mattered little. What mattered was the allure of a secret, something shocking enough to repeat. Complicating matters further, vitiligo continued to alter his skin, creating the illusion of new procedures where none existed. Stage lights, makeup, and uneven pigmentation combined to make him appear different from one day to the next. Once the public accepted change as evidence of surgery, every variation reinforced the belief. The irony was stark. Efforts to manage a medical condition were interpreted as cosmetic transformation. One account recalls Michael lingering in the makeup room after a show, foundation removed, patches clearly visible. He studied his reflection, exhaled softly, and murmured, almost to himself, "If they see this, the rumors will start again." not despair, just exhaustion. That was the moment the spiral accelerated. Speculation fed speculation. Suspicion validated itself. Even admirers were not immune to repetition. Michael stood at the center, bracing against the wind. In reality, he did not undergo the extreme number of surgeries attributed to him. But perception outweighed fact. Feeling misrepresented, he grew more guarded, more withdrawn. And so the cycle tightened. Withdrawal bred mystery. Mystery bred rumor. Rumor reinforced the image of someone losing control. The tragedy was not rooted in what he did, but in what he could not stop others from believing. Nothing cuts deeper than the moment a person realizes their own body has become public discourse, a topic everyone believes they are entitled to dissect. That cruelty, however, did not arrive all at once. It advanced gradually, settling over Michael Jackson's life like a fog, at once hazy and painfully sharp, placing him perpetually between blinding spotlights and encroaching shadows, with no clear path of escape. And when debate over what he had done next to his face reached a fever pitch, the truth remained quietly elsewhere, in a place few cared to examine. Inside a body worn down by illness and exposure. Members of his team from that era later recalled that some days his skin lightened more rapidly than expected. Pale patches appeared like diluted brushstrokes, creating uneven contrasts across his face. The daily makeup routine grew heavier and more complex. Thick creams, meticulous color blending, every effort was made to maintain visual consistency. Yet under stage lighting, nothing stayed hidden. A single turn of the head, one exposed patch caught by a camera, and suddenly there was proof for those eager to claim he had altered his skin again. Backstage, however, the reality was clearer. Vitiligo progressed quietly and relentlessly. Those responsible for his skincare said he followed treatment with exceptional discipline, more diligently than most patients. Still, it was a condition immune to status. Late at night, after the lights dimmed, he would study his reflection, not from insecurity, but preparation, trying to understand the changes his body was imposing before he faced the stage again. Subsequent medical evaluations confirmed the diagnosis: vitiligo, a fact documented by physicians, not conjecture. Yet that truth was eclipsed by more dramatic narratives. Rather than accept illness, many preferred intent, not necessarily out of malice, but habit. Michael Jackson had long existed beyond the ordinary, and the unusual around him was easily sensationalized. Doctors involved in his care repeatedly stated that only minor procedures were performed to support facial structure and function. There was no evidence of excessive surgical intervention. Those explanations, however, drew little attention. A legend, it seemed, required a tragedy proportionate to his fame. One aide recalled him entering dermatology appointments calmly, chatting easily. But as new areas of depigmentation were examined, his demeanor would darken, not from pain, but resignation. There was no cure, no reset. In an industry that strips everything bare, each change became another confrontation. Treatment sessions were long, he rarely complained, thanking doctors even for routine care. Yet afterward, he would pull his hat lower, shielding treated areas. Everyone understood. Being seen too clearly can feel like exposure without defense. Surgeons later noted he never demanded radical transformation. Most adjustments were functional, subtle, common within entertainment. Still, each minor change was recast as dramatic surgery. Gradually, his face became a public mask, scrutinized for answers he never offered. Cheekbones, nose, skin tone were analyzed and rearranged into stories detached from fact. The truth about vitiligo, breath, maintenance was drowned out. Once, after rehearsal, he sat alone before a mirror. No makeup, no lights, just his real face. After a long silence, he whispered, "Do I still look like myself?" It was not regret, but exhaustion, and in that moment, those who witnessed it understood. Behind the mask was a man fighting to retain his identity, while the world demanded explanations for every millimeter of his body. There are moments in a person's life that carry immense weight without cameras, stages, or applause. For Michael Jackson, that moment arrived in the final years, when he began to look back on what had happened to his body and public image with the distance of an observer reviewing his own case file. The chaos of rumor had quieted. The exhaustion of constant judgment no longer dominated each appearance. What remained was a measured stillness, as if the turbulence had passed and left room for assessment. A studio colleague recalled that during this period, Michael spoke far less about his appearance, not because he was unaware of change, but because experience had taught him that the narrative was already written. One night after a long session, an old performance clip flickered on a screen. Michael glanced up and offered a restrained smile, gentle, tinged with sadness, the expression of someone finished with explanations. "They always look at the surface first," he said. "It was not complaint, but recognition. An icon's life rarely belongs fully to the person living it." Notably, he grew less concerned with correcting or concealing the skin discoloration caused by vitiligo. The illness had not eased, acceptance had deepened. Those close to him observed that he no longer scrutinized his reflection with suspicion. Makeup remained part of stage preparation, but it was no longer armor, just routine, like adjusting a microphone or choosing wardrobe. He was preparing to perform, not to hide. What gives this chapter its gravity is how the world interpreted his transformed face as something larger than the man himself. To many, it became a symbol, a legend assembled from decades of rumor and relentless analysis. Some read it as evidence of fame's brutality, others as flight from self, still others as the burden placed on extraordinarily successful people of color within unspoken aesthetic codes. Largely unseen was the person behind that image, someone who loved deeply, created without boundaries, and worked to preserve his artistic core while resisting reduction to spectacle. Physicians involved in his care described him as cooperative, attentive to health, not fixated on alteration. Verified records document only a few major surgeries, primarily nasal, with no evidence supporting claims of dozens or hundreds. Still, the preferred story persisted, and that persistence defines the tragedy. Not that Michael changed excessively, but that perception layered distortion upon distortion. A friend once recounted Michael reacting to a fresh rumor with laughter, dry, weary. He joked that if he had undergone all the procedures claimed, there would have been no time left to write or perform. It was not deflection, but fatigue softened by humor. Over time, his face became inseparable from his legacy, alongside the glove, the lean, the voice. Beneath the symbol lies a reminder of how fame reshapes lives, physically as well as spiritually. Debate will continue over numbers. The final truth is simpler. Only a small portion is verified by records. The rest is rumor. When the noise faded, what remained was the music and the journey of an artist who lived, endured injury, and balanced love with pressure, light with shadow. His legacy is not the sensationalism, but the way he gave everything on stage. And that face, however interpreted, belongs to him alone. In closing the record, a clearer picture emerges. Michael Jackson's transformation was never solely a matter of medical intervention, but a revealing cross-section of an artist's life spent suspended between the need to create and the world's boundless demands. Misinterpretations, rumors, and relentless scrutiny settled around him like a persistent haze, obscuring a simple truth. Behind every visible change stood a human being struggling to preserve identity as his body and circumstances evolved beyond his control. While his outward appearance shifted under pressure, the core of the artist remained intact. His instinct for music, for expression, for connection did not erode. If anything, it endured. And perhaps that endurance, quiet and unyielding, is the most enduring legacy he left behind. If this account resonates with you, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to continue exploring